Welcome to Wacky Wednesday on the Arrowhead Addict channel. As always, I'm Adam Best, joined by the golden voice of Sterling Holmes and producer Richard doing his thing behind the scenes. What's going on, Mr. Holmes?
Allergies. That's what's going on. My goodness, this is brutal. But we're here. We're going to have a lot of fun talking a lot of things, Chiefs. I have my men's basketball playoff game tonight. Big day for your boy. Got to show up like Jimmy Butler.
Yeah, not like Tatum. I guess he sprained his ankle though, so
yeah. Don't put that on me. Don't put it. If I sprain an ankle, I'm out, dude. I am not staying in the game. I'm driving my ass home, laying on the couch
for you,
drinking beer and watching sports. So let's hope I don't roll an ankle.
You're gonna come up clutch. I got a feeling, like Kadarius Toney returning punts in the Super Bowl.
There we go.
Should we get to it?
Let's do it.
Mix it up a little bit. All right. Well, before we get started, some of you are listening to this over on our podcast feed. So be sure to come over to YouTube and subscribe because there's original content that you can only get on here and TikTok if you want our shorts. There's a lot of content that you're missing out if you're only listening to this, and it really helps the business. Every subscriber we get, every like we get. So please continue to support us over on the YouTube channel. With that said, let's move into a new segment. We're calling this Washed Watch. And I'm sure we're going to do it with more veterans, but we're going to start with DeAndre Hopkins, the kind of topic of the hour. And Sterling and I had a great conversation on the radio the other day about some of the advanced statistics, trying to figure out just how good DeAndre Hopkins still is. Is he still the player he was 3 or 4 years ago?
Yeah.
And I think if we dig into those numbers and kind of hash this out, we can get a pretty good feel for where he's at. What do you think?
Yeah, let's do it. So some of the numbers that we have for DeAndre Hopkins over the past 10 seasons, only Julio Jones has more receiving yards than DeAndre Hopkins. That on the surface sounds great. Before we give our opinions on this, let's just run through some numbers, okay? We'll talk about whether we think that's past performance, whether we think that's indicative of him falling off, or think of, hey, maybe DeAndre Hopkins still has a lot to give. We will talk about that. But first, we want to go through an unbiased viewpoint here, and that is through the stats. First, it's important to point out that Hopkins had 176 more targets than any other player during the past decade. So volume has been his game. All right, Best, you get into yards per route run.
Yeah, that's kind of my pet stat because it really gets to the efficiency of the wide receiver position, what they do with the opportunities they are given. And so, yards per route run. The last 3 years as a Cardinal, DeAndre Hopkins was at 2.0. The previous 3 years as a Texan, he was at 2.3. Now that might sound like an insignificant difference, but there's a pretty decent difference there. In Houston, he was a top 10 receiver, according to the stat. In Arizona, he was more like top 20. I also want to look at some stats from friend of the show, Matt Harmon of Reception Perception. If there's anyone who's going to get to the bottom of whether DeAndre Hopkins still has or not, it's probably him. So D-Hop still separates versus man in press coverage, but there has been some fall off. Not to the point where you should be concerned, but you just shouldn't expect top 5 get open at will DeAndre Hopkins. Where he continues to be lethal is on short to intermediate routes, curls, digs, comebacks, slants, those type of things. But he has lost some juice on deep routes where he's really incredible. And I think the best player in the league at this particular skill set is his catch rate, those 50-50 balls. He had an 80% catch rate on 50-50 balls in 2022. That wasn't a fluke. He cleared 70% on contested catches each of the previous 5 seasons. So he's really been the best ball winner, I think, in football for a lot of his tenure in the league. And health. Sterling, you made some good points on this, right? about his durability. Is it starting to wane a little bit? So during his first 8 seasons, Hopkins averaged 15.75 games a year. The last 2 seasons, however, that number was down to 9.5. Sterling, do you think this is a significant problem?
Yeah, I do. I mean, if you're looking at it, I don't care. People kept pointing to me, well, 6 games for a suspension. That's still him missing games. That doesn't all of a sudden make the number better. Yeah, it's not an injury, but getting popped for PEDs is not good. Not ideal. Not something you
Also,
want to see.
was he taking the PEDs to come back from an injury, to prevent an injury? I think that is an injury-related suspension.
So for me, this is concerning. I always go back to AJ Green and Julio Jones. I'm not saying DeAndre Hopkins is washed. I'm not saying he's not still a guy who can be valuable for the Chiefs. I'm not saying he's not still a good wide receiver. I just don't think he's a top 5 guy anymore. I don't know if he's top 10 anymore. He's probably more in that mid to back end wide receiver 1. I will say this. He still averaged about 80 yards per game last year when healthy. That's outstanding considering who was throwing him the rock. I mean, it wasn't Mahomes throwing him the ball. It wasn't even Kyler Murray throwing him the ball. It was just a plethora of dudes, and he was still finding ways to make an impact. Again, I think there's still something there, and I don't have an issue of paying DeAndre Hopkins for 1 more year. A 1-year contract, sign you boy up. We start talking about a 2-year deal, a 3-year deal. That makes me very, very nervous. Again, look at AJ Green. Look at Julio Jones. Look at what happened when they started the fall off. There was a cliff, okay? One injury turned into another. One bad year turned into another one. It snowballed. They were never able to bounce back. And I'm not saying DeAndre Hopkins is there. Again, the 80 yards per game is great. But if you want to look up, I think it was Julio Jones. He played 9 games, one of his last very good years in the NFL. Averaged 85 yards per game. What happened after that? Fell off a cliff.
Yeah, and it's a cautionary tale because the Titans thought he was still that dude. They sent a second to the Falcons. Now, we're not going to have to surrender that kind of capital if we do bring in DeAndre Hopkins. But nonetheless, it is a cautionary tale. T.Y. Hilton, Michael Thomas, some other examples of aging receivers who suffered a lot of lower body injuries and were never the same. I'm going to go ahead and say that Michael Thomas is done. I don't care what anybody says. He hasn't been on the field for what, 2 years, really, except in spurts. So, yeah, Evan Miller made a good point that there's this anonymous quote from a general manager going around that basically Hopkins is shot, he can't run anymore, and that he's done. So I don't know. It's one person's opinion.
When did that happen? Because again, he still put up some decent numbers last year. That's him when he can't run. That means he's still going to age gracefully into the NFL or into his waning years in the NFL. Well, I wonder if that's a Bills or a Chiefs anonymous NFL exec trying to take that market down. There's always games of chess going on in the NFL.
You never know. And the thing about Hopkins is he's a little different than Julio Jones because he's never been an A-plus athlete. That's just not his game. He's been a ball winner, a route running technician. He's a very, very nuanced wide receiver who is just as tough as they get. You think back to that play he had, the Hail Murray, where he went up in the end zone with 3 Bills and yanked the ball down to win the game. And that's the kind of guy you're getting. I'm with you. You made a great point on Twitter last week that 1 year, sign me up, probably not long-term collateral damage. But if we get into a multi-year contract, I don't want this to keep us from having L'Jarius Sneed back or something like that, right?
I think Evan brings up another good point on in the comments right here. Says, we'll be shocked by the contract he gets, which won't be from the Chiefs. OBJ got paid, and then Adam Thielen got paid and also got multiple years. Adam Thielen is going to be 33 in August, so the start of the season. Adam Thielen has averaged playing 15 games over the past 3 years, has averaged 10 touchdowns over the past 3 years, although he's come back to earth. He's gone 14, 10, and then 6. But the numbers for Thielen has still been there, and the availability for Thielen has still been there as he played in all 17 games last year. But I do think if you take those two guys as a jumping off point, no one thinks Thielen or OBJ is better or more consistent than DeAndre Hopkins. No one is going to say that. Odell Beckham Jr. got 15 mil base, up to 18 with that $3 million incentives. If that's me and I'm DeAndre Hopkins' agent, I don't know how he gets less than that. I don't. Either the agent bleeped up big time or there's something that we do not know. Because there is no way a guy who has been perpetually injured with less statistics than DeAndre, relatively same age, gets that much more than DeAndre Hopkins. Adam Thielen. There's no way Adam Thielen gets that much more security at his age being a perpetual wide receiver 2 and red zone threat. I don't see it. DeAndre Hopkins, if he does not get a combination of those two dudes' contracts, that agent is either horrible or, again, there is something we do not know.
A few thoughts here. First of all, you mentioned the name Adam Thielen, and he was one of only 2 wide receivers over the age of 31 that had 500 or more yards last year receiving. So that's kind of scary when you think about Hopkins is about to turn 31. The other thing is this Odell contract has made a huge mess of things. And I think the only reason he got what he asked for, that what is it, 15 can be as big as 18, something like that. I think the only reason that happened is the Ravens were uncharacteristically desperate and needed to do something to bring back their franchise quarterback. That was an olive branch, a panic move, an olive branch to Lamar Jackson. And on one hand, I don't think other teams are going to let that set the market. You know, there's a lot of, whenever there's a bad contract, Deshaun Watson, Christian Kirk, there's a lot of pushback. So and then the last thing I want to say is that culturally, DeAndre Hopkins has kind of flamed out of 2 franchises. He's not really the guy you want around when a team is losing. We've all heard the stories. I don't want to blow it out of proportion, but I do think it is a factor.
Well, this team wouldn't be losing by any stretch of the imagination, but I will again point out, I understand the OBJ contract. I understand what you're saying. That's probably a little bit high. But again, if you're DeAndre Hopkins, he's been about his money. He still says, yeah, I'm about that money, right? I don't think he's all of a sudden going to change. I mean, the Chiefs supposedly offered, hey, I get it. He's made over $112 million in his NFL career. Dude, yes, I get it.
I'm screaming at him, not you.
I get it, man, but it's money. He's going to try and take it. That's what he's done. That's what he's been about. Whoever offers him the most money, I'm assuming that is where he's going. That's where he's done before. That's what he's done, and that's what he said.
Yeah. No offense, man, but the quote, youth is wasted on the young, I think it is accurate. I'm in my 40s now, and there are more important things than money. Living comfortably is very important, but man, DeAndre Hopkins has a chance at immortality, at Canton, at being in the Hall of Fame.
He'll still be in the Hall of Fame, dude.
Nah, I don't know.
DeAndre Hopkins is a lock for the Hall of Fame if he retired right now.
I don't know what you're going to see happen with receivers. This is a passing league now. Numbers are coming up. So I think Mike Evans is going to feel a little bit better about, how he padded his credentials by getting that 1 ring. I think a ring is very important
for a quarterback. I think it's way less. I think it's way less for a wide receiver. I'm just saying, man, what he has done, it's phenomenal. I still think he's going to play a few more years yet. Maybe I jumped the gun saying a lock if he retired right now, but he's going to play 3 more years easy. He's going to put up how many more yards? He's going to be top 30 all time in receiving yards and all these statistics when he's done. Man, I think DeAndre Hopkins, even without a ring, is going to make the Hall of Fame. I don't think a championship ring for a wide receiver is going to move the needle that much.
I don't know. I think voters, I wish they were more analytical, but I think a lot of times it's more about the brand. How do you remember this person? What is the legacy? What is the story?
would you say, and this is what I go by, this is why I appreciate Frank Gore. I think Frank Gore deserves to be in, but I think Jamal Charles in my case, and take the Chiefs stuff out of this, take my fandom out. Frank Gore was never considered the best running back for any sort of stretch. He was not a top 3 running back in any part of his career. Jamal Charles was basically the entire time he was in the NFL. That to me means more, right? What is your peak, and can you do it for a while? DeAndre Hopkins was a top 3, if not the best wide receiver for how long? 6, 7 years? I mean, that's a long peak. That's a long peak.
Right. I think I wouldn't probably put him that high when you look at efficiency, because I think he got there on volume, but he's no question been top 6, top 8, top 10 for a decade. And I agree with you. It is not the hall of longevity. It is the hall of fame. It is about greatness. It is about, were you one of the top players in your position for a decent stretch of time? So I'm with you. I think Jamal Charles deserves to be in over Frank Gore, but I'm not sure the Hall of Fame voters see it that way. I guess we'll find out. I don't know. I think DeAndre Hopkins is probably going to chase the bag. I imagine he'll end up in somewhere like Carolina, where he'll be
Carolina. I like that. You got that hat on, that shirt. You got a nice little draw on the best.
Carolina, yeah.
Carolina.
But don't you kind of think he's going to go to the highest bidder? There's going to be some team out there. And the reason I mentioned Carolina is you have Bryce Young. You have a lot of cap room. You want to make sure your rookie quarterback doesn't get David Card, right? Put in a terrible situation that they never recover from. You do not want to see that. You also want to know if they're the guy as quickly as you can. Insert DeAndre Hopkins, reliable target. I don't know. I just think some team like that is going to throw a lot of money at him. And also, we talked about this the other day. Could we use another edge rusher more than another receiver? Because the defense does not have Patrick Mahomes. They don't have. I love the job Steve Spagnuolo does play calling, especially late in seasons, but they do not have Andy Reid. So do we need that? Do we need that more than another receiver?
For the first half of the season, yes. Because it takes about half the year for rookie edge rushers to make an impact. George Karlaftis, Kayvon Thibodeau, Aiden Hutchinson. I mean, you look around the NFL, rookie edges typically take about half the year before they really get their legs and start winning. I expect the same thing from FAU. Don't think it's going to be any different. And I will also point out, it remains to be seen if Charles Omenihu is going to miss any games, how many games, start of the year. If that's the case, the beginning of the season, the first 4 to 8 games might be a little light at edge. Once the season progresses, I'm fine. Let FAU start going out there and taking some QBs down. But early in the year makes me at least a little bit nervous. Before we get to the next segment that I'm very excited about, I want to give everyone a chance to go to DraftKings. Help us out. Help your wallets out if you're good at betting, and go to DraftKings. Use promo code Arrowhead. Bet $5 on any sport. Get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Win or lose. NBA Finals. First game starts tomorrow. What better way to boost your wallet? Boost the weekend by winning some money. So go to DraftKings. Use code Arrowhead for that. Bet $5 on any sport. Get $200 back in bonus bets instantly. Win or lose. This offer is available for new customers who are 21 plus and physically present in legal gambling states. Please remember to always gamble responsibly. Check the episode description for the full terms of the offer.
That it? I never know when these things are over. They just run on and on and on.
I'm setting records over here. I would be the best auctioneer.
I don't disagree. So this new segment is Veach's greatest draft hits. We're going to collectively decide Brett Veach's 5 best draft picks based on value. Now, we're not going to consider Patrick Mahomes his pick. I think everybody knows it's his pick, but he wasn't officially GM until after that draft when Dorsey got fired. So we're going to start from the 2018 draft all the way up to the one that just happened, which, you know, some of this is speculation about players, what players will be. I guess let's start at 1 and go up to 5. Do you have strong feelings about number 1?
No, let's start with all five, and then we'll sort them out. How about that? Because
yeah.
Well, because let's start with all five and sort them out. I like Balloon Raccoon. This offseason dragging, huh? You bet your ass is dragging, pal. But soon, very soon, we'll have more. We're in OTAs now. 99 days till we actually have legitimate football, which means the Chiefs, because they're the first game played. So 99 days till real football. 99 days to hear us talk, complain, love, hate, and then the games matter. So stick with us. Have fun. We have all summer long. Get sunburned outside. Don't get sunburned. Please put on sunscreen. I don't want that responsibility on my head. I will feel awful. So stick with us, though. All right. 2018. Let's just go through the draft and just talk about how bad this draft was. Breland Speaks, Derek Nottie, Dorian O'Daniel, Armani Watts, Traymon Smith, Khalil McKenzie. Yikes.
It's one of the worst drafts I've ever heard.
I mean, think about this. Brett Veach, at this point, is known as one of the best, if not the best GM in football, right?
Yeah.
After 2018, looking back, you'd probably say, wow, that might have been the worst draft of any team in 2018.
Yeah, it certainly took him some time to find his groove. I mean, that was a putrid draft. Just you look back at it and you think, what were they doing? How did they miss just on every single occasion, basically?
So let's get into 2019. 2019, of course my thing did this. I had it all pulled up nice and neat in front of me, and you know what it did?
What?
It all went away. All of it.
Man, this is
all
not a good day.
Stuff.
Not a good day for technology, because I think my
air
stopped working about an hour ago, and I'm sweating bullets, dude.
I got it back. Don't worry. I'm very technologically savvy, which is a complete joke. So if you know me, I'm the least technological savvy 29-year-old you might know.
You're not Bill Gates in the garage over there?
I am not, surprisingly, no. I am very far from Bill Gates. Nick Allegretti, Darwin Thompson, Rashad Fenton, Colin Saunders, Juan Thornhill, McCole Hardman. Any of these in 2019 you think deserve to make the top five, or at least in the discussion of top five?
I do not. I don't.
Okay.
I'm not Juan Thornhill's biggest fan, so maybe other people would, but this is top five.
I will say, you look back at his first 2 years, not great, but I will also point out he got a lot of solid contributors in that draft, right?
Mm-hmm.
He didn't necessarily hit a home run on any of them, but there were a lot of contributors. Hell, Nick Allegretti, 7th rounder sticking around, right? Rashad Fenton, 6th rounder. He was playing his rookie year in a Super Bowl, and he was lined up getting snaps. I mean, say what you will. Colin Saunders getting snaps. McCole Hardman getting snaps. Juan Thornhill as a starter. So, yeah, that draft, you look back and say, wow, he really didn't hit anything great, but he had a lot of singles. You look at that. That's a lot of singles.
Especially serviceable when you consider that he completely flopped the year before. So what you're seeing is a pattern of Veach growing, getting better with each draft class. And you like to see that. You like that he learns how to get better at his job every single year. I think there's other indicators of that outside the draft, but I think that's the pattern we're going to see here.
Yeah, very good run for role players. Now let's get into the 2020 NFL draft for the Chiefs. 7th round, Bo Peep Keys. 5th round, Mike Dana. 4th round, L'Jarius Sneed. 3rd round, Lucas Niang. 2nd round, Willie Gay. 1st round, I screamed at my TV and almost broke it, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. All right, so this one, a little bit more of a mixed bag. Obviously, Clyde, not great. Willie Gay Jr. and Lucas Niang, quite frankly, both have been immensely talented, but both have been, I think, disappointments.
Yeah.
Lucas Niang more so because of injury. But Willie Gay Jr., I mean, you look back at what he's done so far, we're still talking about potential, right? We are still here 4 years later talking about potential. 3 years going into his 4th year. At some point, it actually has to translate. But L'Jarius Sneed, obviously, we're putting in the top 5, correct?
Easy decision. No pushback here.
One name I want to bring up, and we'll talk about it. I think Mike Dana might get his name called as either an honorable mention or at the 5th spot. We'll talk about it more, but I'm going to leave him at least on your radar because I think Mike Dana, where he was drafted, if that matters to you, and we're going to use that as a contributor, Mike Dana in the 5th round, I think he's been over Willie Gay Jr. He's been over Clyde. He's been over is he over Juan Thornhill and McCole Hardman, though?
I think so, because I think, has he exceeded expectations for a 5th rounder? The answer is yes. Did Juan Thornhill or McCole Hardman exceed expectations for a much loftier draft position? No, they did not. So I think that's what we have to consider here. Mike Dana is just a terrific 5th round pick. And at the time, people thought it was a reach, but he's turned out, and I was one of them, because on paper, he doesn't pop at all, but they saw something with him. He plays his guts out, smart player. He's been just a hell of a find for Brett Veach. And I think he's in contention for this list.
Yeah. I was one that didn't like the pick, but Mike Dana's the guy who's got me more sold on, give me a guy with floor. Give me a guy who I know can get something done, and stop talking to me nonstop about potential. Joshua Kando, Malik Herring, Tano Passanio to an extent. Stop it. None of those guys did anything. Give me Mike Dana. Give me a guy who you know has somewhat of a floor. Let's get into the 2021 draft for the Kansas City Chiefs. Let's get into it right here. They drafted in the 6th round Trey Smith, 5th round Cornell Powell, 5th round Noah Gray, 4th round Joshua Kando, 2nd round Creed Humphrey, 2nd round Nick Bolton. Now we're talking.
Yep. Now we're cooking with gas. I think you've got 3 that are in strong contention for this top 5. Trey Smith in the 6th round is just absurd. I mean, that is rare value. You only get value like that when there was some kind of issue coming into the draft, like Tyreek Hill's off the field history or the health concerns with Trey Smith. Got to put him in there. And then I think we have to look at both Bolton and Creed, but especially Creed, because Creed Humphrey, if he's not the best player at his position in the entire league, he's number 2 behind only Jason Kelce. And I think we're entering an era where he is going to be the guy at the center position in the entire league. So even though he was picked in the 2nd round, I would say he's exceeded expectations from day one. He's been, an all-pro level player from the first time he stepped into a game in the NFL. So that's impressive to me. So all 3 of those picks have a shot.
Yeah. I will also point out we were not doing this current year's draft because we have no idea what dudes are going to be. It's unfair to throw FAU, for example, into the equation here because we've not seen dude play a snap. There wasn't necessarily a draft value pick in 2023 that really stood out. Let's just say last year, Trent McDuffie, I think, was more of a value pick as he was falling. No one expected McDuffie to fall to where he did in that draft. You can make the case that there was the value there, at least according to the consensus big boards. I don't want to use 2023 because, hell, again, we don't know. So let's look at 2022. Najee Johnson, Pacheco, Jalen Watson, all in the 7th. 5th round, Darian Kennard. 4th round, Joshua Williams. 3rd round, Leo Chenal. 2nd round, Brian Cook and Sky Moore. 1st round, Carl Loftus and McDuffie. All right, what do you think here?
Well, one thing I'm also considering heavily here is positional value. So for me, someone like Jalen Watson, because he plays cornerback, gets a huge spike. And I'm going to prefer that over a pick like Isaiah Pacheco. Great pick, fantastic player, fan favorite, but let's not kid ourselves. He doesn't play as important of a position as Jalen Watson does, even if he is probably a better player at his position.
That's fair. I'm thinking the same thing too, because for me, I have Pacheco on the outside looking in. Mm-hmm. Okay. From this draft, I think the names you can make a case for: Watson and Williams. I think Joshua Williams in the 4th was actually a very valuable pick. I think they're kind of both, in my eyes, on the outside looking in, though. I don't have either in my top 5. The other guy I look at, McDuffie and Karlaftis in this draft. Those are the 2 other guys I look at in this draft. But what have you noticed? As the drafts have gone on, he's kind of finding more and more impact players, right? Outside of L'Jarius Sneed early, he found, Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith, and Nick Bolton. But then he started finding George Karlaftis, Trent McDuffie. It seems like he's starting to find more and more impact players. As the drafts have progressed, he's gotten better.
And I would even say Sky Moore if he continues to develop, because, some draft sites had him in the first round. That's where they rated his stock. But he hasn't materialized fully as that level of a player. So, man, for me, I think the most impressive picks in my eyes are either Trey Smith in the 6th or L'Jarius Sneed in the 4th. And then Jalen Watson has got to be up there. Creed Humphrey's got to be up there. And then there's probably a discussion for 5.
Let's listen to this. Okay, because we're going to agree on a few of these. 1, we're going to say L'Jarius Sneed.
Oh,
can we agree there?
Are we?
You better.
I think Trey Smith is pretty close. I'm fine going L'Jarius Sneed.
It's guard. You can't talk all about positional value. Don't want to hear it. You can't talk about positional value and then put a guard 1. Come on.
Guards are
best. Where's the consistency?
Guards are way more important than running back. I'm talking like running backs, linebackers, positions like that. I'm not talking about guard when you're protecting a half a Billy quarterback. I'll give L'Jarius Sneed. I'll give L'Jarius Sneed the nod.
You're not going to do this to me. Okay. You're not going to talk about positional value and throw with a guard at number 1. And by the way, I'm with you. Him in the 6th round is great.
Yeah, there's a 2-round
the thing I will here. Really quickly, I'll say on Trey Smith too, there was no question about his talent. It came down to his medicals. Not very many teams cleared Trey Smith. I don't know if it was only the Chiefs that cleared Trey Smith. So I want to throw that caveat out there. I obviously give Brett Veach a ton of credit, but it also came down to medicals. That's why he fell. We knew the talent was there. It was a little bit like Tyreek Hill, right? Yeah. There was the off the field, different, obviously, right? Because Trey Smith had no off the field issues. That's not what the equation was here. It was strictly health. So just want to throw that out there.
But the delta between where they should have been picked and where they were ultimately picked was significant, because based on play alone, you can make a strong case for Trey Smith being a 2nd rounder, and he slipped all the way to the 6th. So great value there. L'Jarius Sneed, you might say he's the best, or in the argument for the best slot corner in the league, one of the more versatile secondary players in the league. So I'm fine with him being 1 based on positional value, but I do think there's a case for Trey Smith.
You know what? I'll do it. We'll do it this way. You give me your top 5, because you and I are actually going to disagree, I think, a lot more than we think.
Okay. Trey Smith 1, L'Jarius Sneed 2, Jalen Watson 3, Creed Humphrey 4. 5. Man, 5 is tough. I'm going to go Mike Dana. Nick Bolton was considered, but he was a 2nd-round pick. So you really have to be at Creed's level to be considered for this list, in my eyes.
Yeah, we disagree a lot here. So for me, my number 1 is L'Jarius Sneed, 4th rounder, premium position. If he is traded, he's going to get banked by a team. L'Jarius Sneed is one of the best chess pieces in the NFL. I'm all in on L'Jarius Sneed being the best draft pick by Brett Veach. Number 2, Creed Humphrey. At the time, I was fine with the pick, because I go, okay, he's going to be a good center in the NFL. I thought he might have the potential of being a top 5 guy, but I remember even writing an article going, I don't know if he's ever going to be an all-pro, but he's going to be very, very good for a long time here in Kansas City. Well, I was kind of right. He's going to be good for a long time here in Kansas City, but he's at an all-pro level. Creed Humphrey is, again, the best or 2nd best center in the NFL. Again, pretty high pick for a center, 2nd round, but when you hit it like this, you nailed it. Creed Humphrey, number 2. Number 3, It's not because I'm a Mizzou guy, but Nick Bolton, something had to happen at linebacker. That was the slowest, worst position group for the Kansas City Chiefs. It was horrible. It was brutal. I liked Anthony Hitchens more than almost anyone else. And even I will say it was time for something new. But they needed someone who was smart. They needed someone who could come in week one, game one, and frankly, pick it up quickly just in case. Nick Bolton was that guy. Nick Bolton is a green dot. He is smart. He is intelligent. He's not the most athletic. But they couldn't afford to draft the highest upside guy at linebacker. They needed somebody who can come in and make an impact. He was that guy. Nick Bolton is one of the best run stuffers in the NFL. I understand the tackle numbers, the analytics. They don't always go eye to eye when it comes to Nick Bolton, but he's improved year after year. Nick Bolton, for me, is number 3. Number 4, Trey Smith. I'm going Trey Smith at number 4. Trey Smith, all the reasons you gave, 6th rounder. You've kind of heard my take on this already, so I don't want to get into the weeds too much on it. But again, guard, in my opinion, drops him down because of the 6th round. If we're going positional value, there's your positional value. And then 5th came down to Karlaftis and McDuffie. McDuffie had the pedigree. McDuffie has all the things I like, the makings of a CB1, a lockdown CB1. The issue is we've not seen it with any sort of consistency yet. We haven't because of the injury. Not completely his fault, but it's the truth. So for that reason, I'm going with George Karlaftis. The reason being as well, he was my guy I wanted the Chiefs to draft in the end of that 1st round. That's a guy I was saying, please, Brett Veach, please bring him home. Again, same thing. They needed someone who could be a game 1, day 1 starter. He was. They didn't have to go for a high upside guy because they couldn't. They needed someone to get some snaps early. Karlaftis was that guy. And guess what we saw him do? We saw him put up huge numbers as the season progressed. Huge numbers for a rookie, I might add. I expect him to be a double-digit sack guy easily this year. Easily. Put him down for 10 plus. Lock it. That's Sterling's lock. Okay, Best? You take it to the bank. And if I'm wrong, well, I'm wrong. Hopefully no one remembers this. But that's my list. Karlaftis 5, Smith 4, Bolton 3, Creed 2, Snead 1.
Okay, the big difference between our list is I put much more stock into hitting on late round picks. That's obvious. For me, if you're a 1st round pick, I need you to be a superstar to be a value. You can be an acceptable pick if you're just good, but for me to put you on this list, you would have to be a superstar. And Karlaftis is not that. He doesn't look like he's going to be that. I'm not trying to like disparage the
Was
guy.
Tamba Hali a superstar?
What's that?
Was Tamba Hali a superstar?
No, he wasn't.
He's a great pick, though. You know why? He lasted a long time. He has a high floor. Those guys you have to have on your team. Those guys open it up for everyone else. Karlaftis, in my opinion, again, he's probably not going to be a superstar, but he's going to be a damn good player for a long, long time. If last year was any indication, this is going to be a consistent 8 to 12 sack guy year in and year out.
Well, we'll see. With Tamba Hali, we knew that he basically played, a decade. For Karlaftis, there's a lot of time before we can say this guy had, a great Chiefs career. He was worth where we selected him. My other big issue with your list, we're talking about positional value. You're hammering me for picking a guard, but I would say middle linebacker, less important in today's NFL, especially for this team when the offensive line protects Patrick Mahomes. So that was probably my biggest gripe. In the 2nd round, Creed Humphrey is a star. He is the best at what he does, or one of the 2 best. Nick Bolton is not there yet, in my opinion. I don't want to underestimate the importance of the green dot, the leadership, kind of replacing Anthony Hitchens, but didn't make my list.
I love this. Middle linebacker is unimportant until you have an aging Anthony Hitchens. That's great. Also, KL368, there's not 32 superstars in every draft. High-end players matter. I'm with you, man. That's why I like Karlaftis as a high-end player. You're not going to have a superstar at every single position, especially when you're drafting at the back end of the draft year in and year out. I will also say, I don't know how you went with Jalen Watson.
Because he's a 7th round. He's a 7th round corner that's picking off Joe Burrow and Trevor Lawrence in the playoffs. Him just being a decent,
I don't know if he's better than Joshua Williams.
Huh?
I don't know if he's better than Joshua Williams. If you're just going on a draft capital at being a seventh compared to a fourth, then fine.
I am going on that. I think he probably is better than Joshua Williams. They're at least neck and neck, and he was picked three rounds later. You should not be able to find a rookie corner in the 7th round who's good enough to start for a winning Super Bowl team. That is absurd. That's absurd.
But they have though, because Rashad Fenton a couple of years before for the same case, you can make the same case for him. He's a 6th rounder.
Come on, man.
Sure, but Rashad Fenton was valuable in that Super Bowl. In the Super Bowl, I'm not trying to disagree. I think Watson is going to be better than Fenton. My point is they've shown an affinity for this time in and time out. Charvarius Ward was undrafted. They traded him for the dude that went to Dallas. I'm drawing a blank on his name right now.
That's how good of a trade it was. We don't even remember who he was traded for, but we certainly remember Ward. Again, I just think both these lists are something either one of us can defend. The big difference is I put a lot of stock in hitting on late round picks because it's nearly impossible to get a good starter, to get even a good role player in those late rounds on day 3. Hitting on day 3, I put a premium on that.
Sure. That's completely fair. Yeah. Parker Anger. Thank you, Evan. That was going to drive me insane.
Blast from the past, right?
Anger. Yeah. Good trade.
Very good trade. One of the best trades we've made.
What about Javier Arenas for Anthony Sherman, baby? The old fullback trade. Don't get to see that one too often.
The old sausage. What a character.
No, but again, I'm very... I understand where you're coming from. We just have different value points. That's what it comes down to. You're more enthused with where they were drafted and have they overperformed that draft slot. I'm more, I guess, putting emphasis on if you take them away from this team, if you take away, how much does that impact this team? I think if you take Nick Bolton away from the linebacking core, I think this year might be a little different with Drew Tranquill. But I think last year, if you took Bolton away, that linebacking core was brutal. Right? I think there's no denying that. You take Trey Smith away from the offensive line. I love Trey Smith, but it's still going to be damn good. You take Creed Humphrey away, you might have some issues. I mean, he's the anchor on the offensive line at the center position, right? You take L'Jarius Sneed away from the cornerback room. I think for the most part, over a full season, it would take a huge dip. I think you got by in games here and there, because the Chiefs have done such a great job developing young talent. Obviously, whatever Spags is doing now with these young guys as far as putting them in the right spot to succeed is working. But I kind of went more with what is their impact to their team? And you went position of value, and that's kind of the breakdown, I think.
And for your criteria, you nailed it. I remember when Snead got hurt in the AFC Championship game. We had a collective freak out on Twitter over this. I mean, we thought, okay, the game's over. How are we going to defend Boyd, Higgins, and Chase with a trio of rookies? That's just a nightmare scenario, but they held up. Again, Jalen Watson held up in that game, picked off Joe Burrow. For me, it was all just about how difficult it is to find late round gems. And it's just something that has kind of become Brett Veach's calling card, I think, over these past, I don't know, 3 drafts or so, hitting on players outside of round 3.
Yeah.
And they need to do that. They need to do that because the amount of capital that's being spent on Patrick Mahomes and Chris Jones alone kind of puts them in a position where they have to draft well in order to keep this thing going.
Especially at premium positions, which I've been harping on, why it's such a important thing that Karlaftis is who he is, which is a good player already. He was a good player last year. A good player. Again, I don't think he's going to be a superstar, but he's a good player as a rookie. And having a rookie edge guy on a rookie contract make an impact and start is massive in today's landscape. Look at what Charles Omenihu is receiving from the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah.
Look at that contract. Now look at all the other edge players and what the contracts are looking like. The best bargains are cornerback and edge when it comes to rookie deals. Look at what Charvarius Ward got for San Francisco. Look at what Jalen Ramsey is getting.
J.C. Jackson,
look at McDuffie,
right?
Look at McDuffie. Look at, again, Jalen Watson, Joshua Williams, L'Jarius Sneed so far in that rookie contract. look at Karlaftis, and then hopefully FAU does the same thing as Karlaftis, which is about, halfway through the season, he starts turning it on, 6 to 7, maybe 8 sacks. But if you get a good value from him, again, the best bargains in the NFL.
Yeah, I'd throw wide receiver in there too. Like, paying these guys cheap is just, winning lottery ticket. I love Karlaftis. Just Steve Spagnuolo, please never drop him back in coverage again. I don't want to see that. Nobody wants to see that. His family doesn't want to see that. You remember that play with Christian Kirk? No. What in the world? I have no clue. No clue what he was doing, and I don't think Spags did either.
Yeah. Take us into the next segment.
Yeah, we're going to try something new here. We do that a lot, but this is going to be a lot of fun. It's called Legacy Battle. And I think this is going to be a reoccurring theme periodically. And this week's is Badger versus Shark, Frank Clark versus Tyrann Mathieu. So I ran a poll this week asking which Chief should be remembered more fondly, Tyrann Mathieu or Frank Clark. The results, at least to me, were very surprising. The Shark got 73%. The Honey Badger only 27%. So I could not wrap my head around that. Is it loyalty? Is it, especially because a year and a half ago, Frank Clark was kind of public enemy number one in Kansas City. He was, the entire fan base was furious at him, right?
Dude, he went from loved to hated back to loved. His storyline in Kansas City has been a wild roller coaster of emotions.
It has, and I don't totally understand it. I guess, I think some of it is he was willing to come back on less money, play a supporting role next to Chris Jones, and I think just the mic'd up stuff with him. He's terrific on those interviews with James Palmer and on the sideline when he says stuff like, "This ain't what they wanted." You know what I mean? Like he's charismatic. I'll give him that.
And the contract we have to take with a little bit of a grain of salt because he wasn't going to receive that. It's either you're cut or you're taking less money to stay here. And the market wasn't looking good for a dude with bubble guts. So he was kind of between a rock and a hard place. So he took less money, kind of forced his hand. But in the grand scheme of things, I do think that made him look better in the eyes of Chiefs fans.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of nebulous, right? His health situation. But at this point, we all know he is struggling with some stuff. That he's not totally been the same person he was when he was a younger, totally healthy Frank Clark in Seattle. So that's part of the equation too. But I think a lot of it is just one thing. Playoff Frank. That perception, I would say almost a myth. And I'm going to try to expose that. He does have a penchant for coming up clutch. I will give him that. But sacks, like we often say, are a bit of a counting stat that are kind of affected by a lot of other variables. Coverage, supporting cast. The guys that play next to Aaron Donald, they get a lot of sacks too because they play next to one of the best players in the league who's always drawing doubles. That's what Chris Jones does for Frank Clark. Also, play calling on both sides. So what I wanted to do here was to look at Frank Clark's pass rush win rate from the playoffs to get a better feel for his down-to-down play. So in 2019, that number was 13.7%, barely above Terrell Suggs. And he was never, I'll just say this up front, he was never first in this metric. A lot of times it's Chris Jones, which is impressive considering he's playing inside. 2020, 11%, basically the same as Turk Wharton. 2021, 10.6%, considerably below Melvin Ingram. Now, playing more snaps, but still. 2022, similar situation, 11%, considerably below Carlos Dunlap. Again, the snap difference. And that's one thing to think about with Frank Clark coming back. Would he benefit if we did bring him back by cutting his snaps way down and making him a designated pass rusher? Because, there is something undeniable about him, like this Robert Ory thing, when the game hangs in the balance, he just finds a way to make a big play. I can't argue against that. We've all seen it. We all know it's a thing. When you look at his regular season statistics, which I'm going to be warm to Frank and not get into the regular season because it looks a lot worse. But I don't know how he does it, but he comes up big time and time again. So, yeah.
Really, the only thing I'll say in defense of Frank Clark, which is a weird thing for me to say, he was good against the run. There's no denying that. He set the edge extremely well, even at what was it last year, 255 pounds. So he doesn't have the counting stats, and he was paid to be a counting stats kind of guy. He was paid to be a double-digit sack dude. But I also would be remiss if I didn't at least say he was solid against the run. If he does come back, I'm almost in the opposite boat. I almost don't want him as a designated pass rusher. I'm sitting here saying, you play first and second downs. Let someone else get after the quarterback because you can't. That's not what you've been good at. In the playoffs, different story. As far as playoffs, game on the line, throw his ass in there. Let him get after the quarterback then. He smells blood in the water. Okay. But regular season, first and second down only. That's what I'm in for.
But we're in agreement that with his health situation, he would benefit from less snaps. I mean, that suspension he served last year, I think was kind of one of the best things that could have happened to him because he came back fresher. Now, if you look at leadership, I don't know who you give the nod there. I know Frank is adored in that locker room. I always go back to the quote he had about Derrick Henry, how they weren't scared about Derrick Henry, how they were going to bring it. And everyone thought across the NFL mediascape that was just the stupidest thing you could say. But I think what he did in that game, in that AFC Championship game, was he showed his defense, we're not going to be soft anymore. You guys were soft last year. You guys were soft. That's what kept Mahomes and the offense from going to the Super Bowl. And we don't do that shit anymore. And I think it made a difference. And you made a good point about stopping the run. He came right out in that game, was part of stuffing Derrick Henry. So I don't want to lose that. But I also think the Honey Badger, man, he was the heart and soul of that defense. I think he was the guy who provided the most leadership, who totally changed the culture along with Steve Spagnuolo. I don't want to minimize Frank Clark's role in that, but I think Tyrann Mathieu is much closer to being a true superstar player. And when you look at the salaries, I'm just going to go ahead to that and then go through some numbers for the Honey Badger. Frank made $85.2 million in 4 years if you include his cap hit from 2023. $7 million something this year that they had to kick forward. Tyrann made $42 million in 3. So that's $17.7 million per versus $14 million per. So a big part of this to me is who lived up to their contract. And I think the Honey Badger definitely did. And I don't think you can say Frank Clark did. Now I need to prove that Tyrann did beyond just the leadership that's kind of like an intangible thing. He was a turnover machine. 13 interceptions, 4 fumble recoveries, was all over the place, pass breakups, and his coverage was very good. In 2019, he was elite. His PFF grade was 81.6. He's pretty good in the other years too, not as good. And this is an important part and important designation. He averaged 202 coverage snaps in the slot during his tenure as a safety. That's really rare versatility. You talked about Snead being that queen chess piece. Well, who was that before Snead was that queen chess piece? It was Tyrann Mathieu.
I'll say this. I'm not arguing who the better player is. It's Tyrann Mathieu.
Yeah.
Tyrann Mathieu's been the better player. There's no arguing that. It's the legacy. Who's getting the coffee? Coffee's for closers. It's Frank Clark. Think about in 20 years. We're talking legacy now. Look back in 20 years. Who was going to be remembered more? Frank Clark or Tyrann Mathieu? It's going to be Frank Clark. You know it is. I'm not saying that he was the better player. He wasn't. Tyrann Mathieu was the better player. He was the heart and soul. He changed. He was part of the overhaul of that defense.
Yeah.
I am not disagreeing with that. Again, in a nutshell, if I can say, hey, I'll have Tyrann Mathieu, if I could have Frank Clark, I'm probably going to take Tyrann Mathieu. I think he's the better player, at least.
He was great last year again too. Had some bad moments against the run.
Bad as he was bad as Tyrann Mathieu was bad his third year here in Kansas City. He was phenomenal the first two.
In coverage,
but he left
in coverage. He was horrendous against the run. I'll give you that.
He left a bad taste in folks' mouth with how he left compared to his first 2 years in Kansas City, and he also went after them on Twitter. He didn't make a lot of enemies here. I get it.
Who gives a fuck, guys? Who gives a fuck? Log off.
Fine.
Touch some grass.
People do though. It makes sense though. If it's the same thing with Tony Gonzalez, why he's not remembered by every single Chiefs fan as the legend
that bugs me too.
There's a rip. It bugs me too, but you think it's not gonna? It doesn't play a factor.
It's a business.
Of course, it plays a factor.
It's a business, and the fact with Tyrann Mathieu is he wanted to come back. The Chiefs didn't want him. They went with Justin Reed. Now, was that the best decision? Time will tell. But he wanted to be here. He was very upset about it. He talked about negotiating a contract that entire last year. I think he was disgruntled. I think he felt underappreciated, and I don't think getting into it with fans on Twitter is smart for a player, but it's blown out of proportion. I just think he's the much better player. We should remember.
But we're not talking about, the question wasn't who's the better player. The question was who is going to be remembered more fondly. And again, I will tell you, in 20 years, it's going to be the dude who's top 3 all time in playoff sacks.
Yeah.
When you run back those videos, when you run back the hype videos before the game, you're going to see more Frank Clark than Tyrann Mathieu up there. You're going to see Frank Clark closing the game. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, depending how he finishes in New Orleans, though, Tyrann Mathieu has a chance to make the haul. Frank has no chance. Zero chance. Not even the slimmest of slim chances. He's not going to do it. Never going to happen. So for me, I think this is another argument like our last one where it comes down to criteria. I just want to reward the guy who I think was the better leader, the better player, the better citizen off the field. I mean, that matters to me. Frank Clark embarrassed this franchise. He definitely did. I'm not going to underplay that. He got caught with an Uzi in his Lamborghini, man.
I got to push back on Angry Drunken German's comment very quickly. He said, you don't see a safety close games very often. Tell that to Dan Sorensen.
Ooh. Or tell that to Ed Reed, right?
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying, positional value, all that stuff. But again, I'm not talking about best. You've swayed me there. It wasn't even swaying to begin with. Tyrann Mathieu, his 2 years, the first 2 years in Kansas City, he was the best safety in the NFL. He was part of the regime change. He was part of the implementation, going from one of the worst defenses in the NFL to at least a middle of the pack one. Way more than Frank Clark was. 100%. Not disagreeing. Frank Clark's contract was abysmal. But if we're talking legacy, and you're talking 10, 20 years from now, who will be remembered more? It's going to be Frank Clark.
I think there's a strong argument that Tyrann Mathieu is the greatest free agent acquisition in the history of the franchise. I think there's an argument for putting him in the Ring of Honor. I really do. Mm-hmm. And I think it doesn't really bug me that Frank Clark won this poll. I think what bugs me is the comments and the 73%, the 27%. It does get on my nerves that Tony Gonzalez isn't embraced because he gave everything to the city and they just didn't put him in a good enough situation to win. That is not his fault. Not his fault at all. I remember him super fondly, one of my favorite athletes of all time. And I'm hoping when the dust settles here in 3 or 4 years, we'll get over the Twitter stuff. We'll get over the few bad tackles he missed in his last year and remember the guy who came here, changed the softest defense I've ever seen to one that could win a Super Bowl. And it's just one of the greatest nicknames we've ever seen. Just a phenomenal character. They both are phenomenal characters. And I think that's why this battle's been so fun.
Yeah. Again, I love Honey Badger. I'm not taking anything away from him. Phenomenal player. I hated the Twitter stuff he did, but again, that's his own business, not mine. End of the day, he was influential and very important in bringing the Chiefs a Super Bowl. I will remember him fondly, just how I remember Frank Clark fondly, just how I remember every single player who had an impact fondly for this Kansas City Chiefs team. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, that's my opinion. If I'm going legacy, I think it's Frank Clark, but I love both these dudes. They were both important in bringing rings to Kansas City.
Yeah, and I'm probably about as low as it gets on Frank Clark. He's Robert Ory. That's what he is. He makes big plays and not much else. You know what I mean? But
Derek Fisher, 0.4 seconds, baby.
Yeah. Julian Edelman made a career of being better in the postseason than he was in the regular season. So I get it. He's the one that stuck around. I think he kind of tried to play hardball a little bit maybe though, and eventually just saw that was his value. It wasn't Tyrann's fault he wasn't back last year. I just hope fans remember that he wanted to be here. It's not like he said, screw Kansas City or anything like that. And he was right about his value. A pretty good franchise gave him the contract he sought. So keep all those things in consideration, I suppose.
Yeah. Before we get out of here, just want to get everyone a heads up. The Arrowhead Addict merch store is now live, and you can visit right now by clicking the link in the description below. We've got everything from shirts to hoodies to baby onesies and even a sweet pint glass to drink your KC beer from. By the way, don't give your baby the pint glass, but, give them the onesie. Give the baby the onesie and get yourself said pint glass. But if you want to do it, go there in the description below. And if you're listening right now, we have a promo code. If you use code PM15, aka the initials for Patrick Mahomes, PM15, you get 15% off of your order today. And make sure you use it now because that code expires by Sunday. So if you want to rep the podcast, keep us going.
Please.
Come on, baby.
Please.
Keep us going. Keep us going. Come on. Let's party. If you want to party too and have a sweet pint glass, coffee mug, baby onesie, and more, description below.
I want to give Richard a little credit for that. He just pulled it down too. The legacy battle graphic he had. Have you ever look on YouTube sometimes and check out these battles of who would win between a shark and an alligator or a grizzly bear and a silverback gorilla? I've gotten lost in so many of those rabbit holes.
Probably an alligator, because an alligator can just go off on land. A shark can't.
Depends where the battle is fought. If it was fought in sand, it would be, or in the swamps, it would be a pretty quick fight. But if it was fought deep in the ocean, I think it'd be a pretty quick fight too. What about a grizzly bear versus a silverback?
No, we're getting out of here. I just saw 4 people in the chat talking about Brody Croyle. At that point, that means we got to wrap it up, baby.
Yeah. You don't want them going to Palco and Thigpen. I mean, that's not good for your mental health, guys. So
Kyle Orton.
No.
Big game Orton.
Wellness
Big
check. We're not going there. We're not going there. All right, guys. Another fun edition of Wacky Wednesday, and we will see you next week. Until then, go Chiefs.